Every film is a product of its time and tells you something about the time it was made. There's a special status that comes to some films that lodge in the audience's collective imagination. Alien is certainly one of those films.
All right, hey guys, welcome back to the channel. You thought 10 movie hours on the Alien and Predator franchise was enough. You were false. You were wrong. We had mentioned in our Alien movie hour this many times over, which is the documentary Memory, the origins of Alien, but we felt it high time that we actually devote an hour to talking about just this documentary because it's that rich. So we are, without further ado, going to say cheers to Mr. Scott, Mr. Giger, and Miss Weaver and dive into it.
They don't touch on Weaver enough in this, do they?
Like barely.
I just thought, you know, she's such an integral part of the stew, and they don't even touch on her.
They touch on her character, but not enough, if anything, is paid to Miss Weaver.
Yeah, there were a number of like YouTube reviews of this that I went through, some horrible, some great, but a lot of which would say like that they wish it were longer because it's not that long, but I think it's really good and contained for what it is. I think it's just right for like a larger audience, but they could have totally done like a fan extended version possibly.
Yeah.
But anyway, get us right into it.
So let's start with a bit of show and tell. So let's start with our moments here. Chad, tell us what you're wearing this evening. Who are you wearing?
My shirt is by this company called Last Exit to Nowhere.
Love it.
If you haven't been to their website, go check out their website, Last Exit to Nowhere. And
we'll link it.
Yeah. And I think they're a great like small company, and they do these really unique, really cool, like insider fan, like the good shit for Alien and Aliens. And this, of course, is the titles forming. So as they form in the film, this is exactly what you see in this order. And then you get to Alien at the bottom. And then it has the...
Yeah,
so,
I think that...
To me, that was brilliant. I had to get it.
We were just talking about offline, like how great, how well designed that shirt is, because you don't even have to read the words. You literally know what you're looking at, because that title sequence is so iconic. Yeah. I gotta get another adjective. I am wearing this beautiful Vitruvian Man, but the xenomorph a la Da Vinci that was gifted to me by my beautiful friend Carissa. And of course I have my Toys R Us face hugger.
I think these shirts both speak to like the more high art side of Alien, which this documentary really props up, right?
And so you only watch Chad and Mel movie hours because of the highbrow content.
Right. Hey, if it's not highbrow, we'll make it highbrow.
We're making it. And then Chad gifted me this beautiful little Xeno.
Yes, from
Translucent Head. Gorge. So yeah. And Chad is the reason I even know that this documentary exists. He introduced it to me a couple years ago, like 2018 we watched it together. And my God, how many times have I watched it since? And when you first showed me that...
You just keep renting it.
Wait, say that again?
Do you own it by now, or do you just rent it, or what's happening?
Sadly, I keep renting it. I should own it by now, because in the
amount I feel like with the amount that we rewatch movies, especially myself, like that's why I still think it's viable to kind of own movies a little bit. Yeah. I mean, not all of them, of course. I watch a ton of movies that I don't want to own.
Right.
But yeah, I do own this one. So this is the Memory DVD. I don't have the Blu-ray, which is so lame, but it's the DVD.
Unacceptable.
It actually is not that great quality because I just rewatched it. The first viewing I saw of this was I rented the HD version, which is a lot better quality than this, and you and I watched that version. What's cool about this one is it comes with postcards. So this is a horrifyingly bad example of what could have been.
It looks like
Thank
the
God
Predator.
it did not become that. And this is not Giger. Lest anyone think this abomination came from the hands of the genius that is Giger, you'd be wrong.
Walk
This
away.
is like O'Bannon's art, Dan O'Bannon's art.
We love you, Dan, but you're no
which
Giger.
is fine, but
You're
yeah,
no. We're just saying you're not Giger. That's all we're saying.
now this is Giger right here. And he was, so I learned from this documentary that he was highly inspired by Egyptian art. We knew that, but what I didn't know is this is a specific Egyptian art. This is a female. That's her lips and her jaw and her arms and her leg. And there's a specific Egyptian piece of art that is that same formation. Several. So it's taking from that motif. And Giger was obsessed as a young man with Egyptian art. So there you go. That was a good tidbit from this film. Okay, so this is the space jockey.
But who? It's not Giger. Who sketched that? Ridley?
It says something there. Sketch for Alien Cockpit, 1978, H.R. Giger.
Oh,
so
no
even
shit.
though the
Okay.
signature does not look like Giger, this is H.R. Giger. And then we have a not so Giger-ish
Look how cute. Look at how
idea
cute.
of what this thing was going to look like. And in this documentary, Dan O'Bannon says that they were envisioning the face hugger to have to be like the size of a man's fist coming out of someone's chest. And you can see that's the size it was there. And the real one ended up a little smaller, which I think was better. But anyway, you get those 4 postcards and a really cool pin that I didn't bring down, but I should for show and tell as well. If you'll give me 1 second, I'll grab it.
Go. Go get it. I'll just zhuzh my hair while you're gone. Just a tight zhuzh.
So here's the pin that the company also put out. There were 2 different pins, and I only got this one. This is the alien egg with Giger's design of the face hugger, which was different. It was bigger and more octopus-like, and the spiral tail at the bottom of the egg.
It's gorgeous.
Can you see that well?
There's a little bit of a glare on it, but maybe we can also, you could take a snapshot and we'll insert it too.
This came with like a deal on their website. They had several different things, but this is sanctioned by the Giger estate, which is cool.
We love a tight sanction.
It's actually one of my favorite things, but you can see the legs of the face hugger. And
gorgeous.
Just interesting. It's the same image as this. So
Cover.
FYI. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which
I
was
love how you can see, like, it's very well articulated that, like, the face hugger's little danger fingers.
The digitals.
Yeah, you get to see, like, the joints and how hand-like they actually are.
Right.
Also designed by Giger.
Yes. Ultimately not.
Ultimately
right?
not.
Because he did original sketches for it, but the final design ended up a little different, and Roger Dickens was the guy that ended up doing the face hugger and the chest burster in the end, because Giger's just were not exactly what they needed for film. And I don't think it's that Giger was not a good enough artist, because that is never true.
Never.
Film and two-dimensional art are very different mediums.
Right.
And he did not go to film school and was catching up and learning a lot on the fly, because Alien was the first big budget film that he was ever involved in. And there was a lot of difficulty changing 2D art into 3D creations for film. So there were several people like Roger Dickens and Carlo Rambaldi, who were 2 gentlemen that helped that process happen. But yeah.
I want to get back into how certain things came to be in this movie, i.e. the chest burster. And, you know, the Memory as a documentary does such an extraordinary job of showing what could have been and how it became what it became. And just as like an aside, because this entire documentary, this is not a traditional BTS behind the scenes documentary. You can get that anywhere.
Right.
This is very much about the mythology of the original film, and more specifically, the synchronicities and the confluence of events, which we've talked about with in the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, like the confluence of right place, right time, right people. You know, you can only catch lightning in a bottle once, right? It's one of those like iconoclastic moments in time. But the documentary is very much about these synchronicities. And just as a fun aside, when you first introduced me to this documentary, it was in 2018. And a year later, I started a graduate program in mythological studies. And I'd already seen this movie. And one of the people that gets interviewed in this movie is a gentleman by the name of William Lynn, who we'll talk about in more detail, who is the head of Joseph Campbell studies at the studio school, I believe it is.
Yes.
And come to find out, you know, a year and a half, 2 years later into my program, I've had the pleasure of like engaging with him and meeting him, because he's a graduate of the school I attend, a graduate of the program I'm in, and has held several mythological salons on film. So it's, again, just an interesting synchronicity that
It is.
here we are full circle. And yeah, so without further ado, let's get into Memory, the origin of Alien.
So I'll talk about William Lynn first, because he's like first up in the doc, actually.
Please.
The thing I love the most that he says is that Alien is one of the biggest cultural dreams we've ever had. I just love the wording of that and the truth of that. And I just found that amazing when he said that. It just rings really true. I'm not as big on the sound vibration with the sand and stuff.
Oh, the somatic experiment.
Yeah, the somatics experiment. That yeah.
A little bit of a stretch.
I think so. Like, I hate to say it. For me personally, you know, you either believe in that or you don't. I just think, you know, that's physics. It's random. But he infers that there's myths that are akin to that, but they're deeper. But he doesn't say where deeper is or what that means. So but you know, I mean, there's a fine line between like mythology and like metaphysics, right?
Yes.
And I'm very interested in mythology as in terms of storytelling and history, but not at all interested that as much in metaphysics, just personally. So to me, he kind of walks the line on that. But there's some stuff he said about like Ripley represents a maternal figure, and the crew of the Nostromo is supposed to be Promethean. I think you can make a case that Ripley does not represent a maternal energy throughout the film. She's very self-protective. She's very like it's her and the cat. She's not about being maternal to the other crew members.
Right.
In the director's cut, you see she gets in a fight with Lambert. There's a lot of tension there. She never gives in on the tension or tries to make it better or gives any of those, maybe they're stereotypes, but those motherly like qualities that you would expect. Maybe there's like a bigger arc of maternal in terms of her being maternal toward the human race. Like, this species cannot get off this spacecraft. I will blow this spacecraft up.
She will turn that car around.
We will turn this bus around. But I mean, you could just say that's just her just being a good person. I don't know. Yeah. So I mean, but okay, here's what I want to break down real quick. Just like everyone else in this documentary, he's giving his take on this film.
Yes.
And that's okay. It's because this documentary mixes fact and opinion.
Yes.
That's something I think that a lot of fans don't understand. They approached it as just a hardcore documentary. It's okay that people have their individual takeaways. And if anything, that's extremely interesting because all we hear are the sterilized facts, right?
Right.
But yet people giving insight that's personal, that may be opinion. It may be true to one, not true to another, whatever. It's
Right.
still interesting to hear. So you have to have that mindset. You have to remember, okay, I agree with this, what this person said. I don't agree with this area of what this person said. It's just not what I vibe with.
Right.
Doesn't mean that they're espousing it as fact. Because
Yes.
I think that this documentary is very aware of the fact that they want to go further than just a typical here are the facts.
Take us to church. Yes. And I mean, why do you watch anybody review a movie? I mean, it's ultimately subjective. It's you're watching somebody give their opinion. So, you know, if you're going to attack anything, and some of, and I want to get into this later on, but some of the reviews that you shared with me of this documentary were, that was lost on them. And it was just like, like, first of all, very few documentaries even get produced anymore. This is not a documentary. This is a opinion piece with facts in it, but
Right.
This is not like an anthropological, ethnographical like documentary of a, you know,
Right.
This is people unpacking what this movie means or could mean.
Right. I think the film, it's so iconic at this point and so meaningful to the fan base that if you're talking about this film, you have to be speaking utmost fact, and that's it.
Right.
But and maybe this type of film is a little more experimental. This is not your typical documentary, nor should it be. And I think that you just have to know what you're going in on. I mean, there's definitely areas that I do not agree with in this documentary, which we will touch on later, especially, you know, just a few statements that are made. I'm like, well, that's your opinion. I just completely disagree. But I'm not like,
it doesn't invalidate the entire film. Yeah.
Right. No, there's a lot great. My favorite thing about this movie, other than the fact that they are taking it to the next level in that way, is some of the behind the scenes footage, which we're not used to seeing, that is straight from the cutting room floor, that shows the alien, you know, being worked on in footage that has not been previously released, and photos I've never seen before. It blew my mind in that regard.
To your point about setting the expectation for this documentary, I think that's something that, I mean, it shouldn't be necessary to set an expectation for anything one watches. Like, that's
right. If anything, I like to go in completely blank. I don't even like trailers sometimes because it's like, I really want to have that full experience of being exposed to something that I wasn't ready for.
Yes.
But a lot of people can't handle that.
No, they can't. No, they can't. And the documentary Memory even opens very differently than you might assume that a movie about another movie would open. And it literally, you know, the camera is panning out of this shot of the Acropolis at, you know, the temple at Delphi in Greece. And there's this dramatization of these Greek figures called the Furies, who are more often than not female in nature, very feminine in nature, and they represent this. They're basically an archetypal figure of. They're kind of like the shadow version of muses in a way. They come to exact revenge on children who have exacted violence on their parents. So the documentary is already like, in and of itself, providing you a mythology for how to understand what it's about to talk about. And that is the context in which you go into this documentary. And one of the first people that's quoted in like the opening credits of this movie says, you know, a film is a product of its time. It tells you something about that time. And if it's successful, that story will reflect the stories that need to be told at a particular point. That is mythology. That's what mythology does. Is simultaneously what we're living and how it's reflected back to us, so such that we can understand it. And so tells you that you're not watching a traditional BTS documentary.
Right. And I think there is truth in that, because I think Dana O'Bannon, as he's writing this, is not of the upper class. He's couch surfing at the moment. He is very aware and in touch of real life and what's going on. And I'm sure that a lot of feeling of the day made it in there in one way or another, or at least some.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think they stretch a little bit, because I mean, how do you feel about them with bringing in the Furies and all that female narrative, when it's a film written and directed by men? I mean, I don't know if those men were in touch with that female narrative.
I agree. Yeah, and that's something important to unpack about this documentary, and just how we examine art retrospectively in general, is how much of it is projection after the fact versus like, what do we know for a fact was their agenda and their intent, right? And there's always going to be like a liminal kind of state in between the two that the art really lives in, right? But and I want to come back to that, but you're referencing Dan O'Bannon, and I would assume people that are going to watch this are probably going to know who he is. But do you want to say a little bit about Dan O'Bannon's role in relation to Alien for people that might not know?
Yeah. So when I was younger, I knew about Ridley Scott and I knew about H.R. Giger, but the man that wasn't talked about as much until you really started getting more behind the scenes was Dan O'Bannon. And so this documentary was produced by his wife, Diane O'Bannon. And boy, is she something.
She's something.
She is such a steward of his life's work. Almost a bit too much at times. She's almost like a fan of his. And it's interesting. It goes into some interesting areas. The story of Dan O'Bannon is fascinating, and it's fascinatingly told in this documentary in a way that it's not told in any other Alien behind the scenes or documentaries. So for that alone, I think Memory's worth watching. Diane may be looking at Dan O'Bannon with rose-colored glasses, but
Sure.
She is espousing truths. She is taking you through her archive of his unpublished materials. She is talking about his history with Jodorowsky and with Giger that predates, Ridley Scott's involvement, right? So he brought that to Alien. That's very important. Dan O'Bannon's already very understated in Alien mythology. So this shines more of a light on that. And it's really interesting. I mean, yeah, he wrote a script that is largely reductive, right? It's reductive on a lot of other works in science fiction, but the actual story and the plot points had been done before, just never this well. That's why a lot of people say Alien is technically like a B movie served up in like A movie wrapper, which I think is a little hokey way to put it. As with anything, it's more complex than that. But I really enjoyed the stuff about Dan O'Bannon. Diane is clearly like a lovelorn wife.
She is. She definitely loves her man. And it's interesting because prior to having seen this documentary, I had never heard of Dan O'Bannon. So this documentary is a gift insofar as it introduces Dan O'Bannon to a more mainstream audience. And we learn, which is just so ultimately, what's one of the more fascinating things about Dan O'Bannon is that this is a gentleman who his wife lets us know grew up in a very rural area with no television, no telephone. Yet he created, like he was deeply tapped into, much like Giger was, almost channeling something from the muses, right? Like he was so deeply tapped into science fiction consciousness, specifically Lovecraftian. He was a huge Lovecraft fan, which we learned. And he was, how did he access this mythology without access to pop culture? It's fascinating as fuck. But he was a huge Lovecraft fan, and a lot of his obsession with insects and Lovecraftian motifs of, wasps and cicadas and these million-year life cycles and this parasitic hibernation. These elements of insects make their way into Alien because we learn from memory he wrote a script called what was it called? It wasn't not Dark Star, but it was called Memory, right?
Memory, right. It was called Memory originally because originally he had the script written up until the point of chestburster scene.
Like
so
the first 30 pages.
Right.
Yeah.
But in that script, what he was going to do is that being in the vicinity of that planet had this pull that would make you forget, and it would give you amnesia. So that was a side effect of the planet, which we never saw that in Alien. If you ever see a Russian film called Solaris from the 70s, that they did the horrible George Clooney remake with, don't even go there.
Yeah, go.
The original film, which is a masterpiece, that film does explore that madness, a psychological madness created by a planet that you're in the vicinity of, whether it's gravitational or whatever it is. Very interesting. It had already been done though.
It's such an interestingly rich concept though, of like memory loss in relation to an alien organism, planets, whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say that I think Diane O'Bannon goes a little far with the whole, oh, he was so amazing that like he grew up with no technology and then he went to the stars. Like just the way she says it, but it's like, we get it. You know, that's her family. That was her lifelong partner. And
right.
It's interesting what he did bring to it and what he didn't bring to it. Like the chestburster idea, which is what this whole documentary Memory centers around, right? Because it's the centerpiece of the film was not in his script or his idea. It was Ronald Shusett, whose couch he was staying on, woke him up in the middle of the night and said, "What, I've got the way to progress your script." You know, it jumps on his face and like assaults him.
Another synchronicity too, like right confluence of right people, right time, you know? Yeah, sorry, my mom just tried calling. 1 second. All right, you're back. Okay. Keep going. We're recording. Sorry.
No, it's all good. No, you're so right. Like there's so much synchronicity. That's to me the most amazing part of this is like all these people and how they interconnect. Like O'Bannon bringing Giger in because he saw an exhibit and took away the Necronomicon book from it, and then was like, Ridley Scott, we've got to use this guy. Please tell me you're on board. And then Ridley going to bat for Dan O'Bannon and saying, yes, we have to use Giger, even though the executives at Fox were like, hell no, this guy is crazy. But they just did not have the foresight.
Yeah.
And even the Jodorowsky stuff, like how Jodorowsky is like pulled into this and a part of this, and how Giger was a part of Dune and how that never made it off the ground, and how like Giger knew Salvador Dali, who knew Disney. It like blows my mind, this circular, this artistic circle at that time in the 70s. Blows my mind.
And that Dan O'Bannon was attached to Jodorowsky's Dune's project, but because it didn't get off the ground, he was able to participate in Alien. And William Lynn
he salvaged that project for Alien because he was like, well, we got to get Giger anyway for Alien. Yep.
And it's so fascinating because William Lynn in Memory talks about this kind of counterbalance of mythologies. Ultimately, none of us will ever, unfortunately, get to see Jodorowsky's Dune, but he talks about how Jodorowsky's Dune is this almost Tower of Babel, both in like in theme and in terms of the scale of the project, where you have Pink Floyd and Giger and Dan O'Bannon and you have everybody, you have all of these, like, just, dare I say, iconic, like prolific entities involved in this project that we will never know. But Alien ended up being, he refers to it as the counterbalance mythologically, or the archetypal response to Dune's Tower of Babel is Alien. and that
And for
it
for our audience, if anyone has not seen Jodorowsky's Dune, the documentary, that is must-see viewing. I think it's paired so well with this documentary memory.
yeah, it would be worthwhile to watch them together, because yes, it's crazy how closely interwoven these projects were, both
Yeah.
like chronologically, historically speaking, but in terms of like scope and myth and cosmology, they were both trying to tell like these epic,
The same story.
yeah.
Or the same energy, the same, almost a very similar vision. Yeah.
And Alien is very much not just like surface speaking, but or superficially speaking, Alien is very much to William Lynn's point, is the shadow version of Dune, in that Alien, where Dune is like the Roman Empire, right? Like this is man. Like look at what we can do, and then Alien is showcasing the hubris of man and how that ultimately leads to our self-destruction.
And it gets into that area of, conjecture and retconning. But to me, it's like, okay, the brilliance of Alien is that you can do that so well with this film, because it's the story's told so well, and the whole project is comes into formation so well, and the visual styling of it is so masterfully executed in Alien that it lends itself so much more to extrapolation, right? So to me, it's a compliment to the film Alien, but the realist in me is like, I see that's like an extrapolation, right?
And I think that's the point of this discussion. I think we need to kind of circle back and end with the point that you just made, which is, where does extrapolation and retconning meet? Like, that was the genius of this, is that it allows for an audience ad infinitum to do just that, to project, to retcon, to excavate. Will we ever know the ultimate intent and agenda and vision of the creator? Of course not.
Right.
But because you have this confluence of creators at their peak collaborating, I think that's what allows for genius to manifest, that there are layers that even they weren't conscious of. And if you were to ask Giger today, or Dan O'Bannon today, or even Ridley today, did you mean for that to mean that? They probably would be like, no. But I would imagine they'd be hard pressed to not see it either.
Right. Not see or not find it intriguing or worthwhile or interesting. I don't know if you've seen another documentary, which I don't recommend, but is fascinating and so relevant to the discussion that we're hitting on right in this particular moment. But Room 237 about is such a specific example of how you can extrapolate from a film what most certainly was not all there, but it makes it hard to discern in that documentary when you watch it. Well, what if this maybe could have been Kubrick sneaking it in, and what is like, it's impossible to know.
Right.
So,
and it's
part of that is scary for certain people of a certain mindset. It's scary. And it gets into a murky area of like, no, this film was filmed on these dates, released in cinemas on this day. There are facts associated with this film that are indisputable. This person directed it. They said this, blah, blah, blah. And then you get really in your head about it, and you get protective of it. And if people aren't willing to be mentally flexible and to see these things in interesting and new ways, which I find very entertaining and delightful. I mean, I just think you're doing yourself a disservice, but it doesn't mean it has to be true, but it can just be an interesting, different take on it.
Right. And I mean, you bring up two things, Room 237 and this kind of attachment / ownership to art, which we're going to unpack in a separate video in more detail, but it bears mentioning that, yes, we will never know, did Ridley mean for that to mean misogyny or male rape? We probably won't know. The fact that we can have a conversation about it is a testament to the end product of said art. And art is ultimately subjective, and even though it is a film with a certain vision released on a certain date, X, Y, and Z, fact, it's still a piece of art. And so that is for the beholder to have an opinion on.
Right.
And going back to Room 237, we'll link all of this in the description, but it's basically all of these theories about the meaning of not King's Shining, but Kubrick's Shining.
Right.
The Shining. But just as another aside, fun fact, synchronicity, one of the kind of people that we study in my mythological studies program is Carl Jung, because he laid the groundwork for the study of archetypal psychology, for depth psychology, for dream work. And one of the things that they mention in Room 237, which a lot of other people have since kind of really delved into deeply, is that in the one of the opening scenes of The Shining, where Jack Nicholson is doing his interview at the Overlook, you see a red book on the desk of the hotel, whatever his name is. And that is a very obvious reference to Jung's Red Book, which is his treatise on the subconscious. And so if you take that to be a literal reference to Jung, then that movie, Kubrick intentionally made that movie to be subjective and for you to take from it and extrapolate from it what you want. And
right.
Alien has heavy Jung motifs as well.
Yeah,
all high art does.
That's the strong parallel here between these two documentaries, is that they're both fixated on a film that is executed at a very, 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 very high level visually.
Yes.
By somebody who's very skilled at executing a film in a visual way.
Right.
They even say in this documentary, they say that Ridley Scott had like a camera for a head. He was so well versed in lenses, photography, how something was going to look, where the camera should be placed, to the point, and I love this so much in Memory, there's this great part where they talk about how if you watch the chestburster scene, it starts off with static cameras. So they're static shots, they're not moving. And then, they're laughing, they're eating dinner. It's right before the chestburster comes. As soon as John Hurt starts to get up and get really upset and start to have his whole episode of having the chestburster come out, Ridley Scott, and this is so fucking genius, he totally switches visual styles from those static shots to all handheld. Okay. So everything gets shaky. Everything gets more intimate. He moves in with the cameras. Everything's closer. Everything's moving around more, where there was no movement before that.
Right.
It sucks you in. And it's incredible. That scene is clearly a masterpiece in cinema. And the whole legacy of the Alien series, all the films, hinges on that scene having been so successful.
And we learn from Memory, or at least I did, as a casual Ridley fan, I learned that he was an artist in his own right, and literally, we referenced this a little bit earlier, he storyboarded everything. I mean, imagine being that hands-on, and
he was not sleeping.
Clearly, we see that. Yeah. And the whole chestburster thing is interesting, because you learn in Memory that Dan O'Bannon got the idea of the chestburster from Tim Boxall's comic called Defiled, where you see this thing coming out of a man's chest. And so Dan O'Bannon is internalizing that, and then it gets shared with Giger, who makes his own iteration of it as this kind of featherless chicken turkey thing. And when they tried to translate, to your point, that 2D vision to a prop, it didn't, it looked silly. And then you get the final version, which is again a confluence of all of these creators, like these different iterations and visions. And then you get, you know, the little baby boop that we all know and love at the end. So, and even in memory, they say that Alien is a synthesis of the myths happening unconsciously. And there's so much happening thematically on a superficial and obvious level in Alien, but then again, there's these other layers that we can retcon or project or excavate.
And again, when a
but
film
why is that?
When a film is executed that masterfully, there's something about that that is more in touch with a deeper level of understanding of laws of physics, of mythology, of all these things. And it doesn't mean that that all was baked in, but
Right.
it just that a film like The Shining or a film like Alien, I almost said The Alien, which is actually the original title.
Right.
It lends itself to that so much easier.
And William Lynn at the very beginning, to, you know, you mentioned earlier at the very opening of Memory, says, you know, this alien is a cultural dream. And you know, you'll have to like, subscribe, and comment. But we just also filmed our movie deep dive into the mythology of A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3, where this kind of collective dream theme is also explored. And the collective dream, the collective unconscious, it's all very Jungian, and it's all very much, these films are very much a product of their time. Alien specifically is very much a product of the late 70s and coming out of the Cold War, or actually going into the Cold War in a lot of ways, and
Even
and imperialism and capitalism and colonialization. Like there's all of these working classes. It's so layered, but it does speak to the point that this is a synthesis of myths happening unconsciously or subconsciously. Like this confluence of creators and all of these synchronicities are happening for a reason, which in my opinion is to reflect back to us exactly what we need in order to understand our reality. So myths are very, like, they're simultaneously fantastical and deeply realistic and personal. And Alien is like living proof of that, in my opinion.
Definitely. I mean, and what came to mind when you were saying that was the fact that they had the wherewithal to be like, hey, maybe for this chestburster moment, Francis Bacon, that's the inspiration, the mouth, the way he distilled terror and glamour in an odd way into a mouth, the combination of horror and glamour and color and expression and terror into the mouth and presented it. What's interesting to me is Francis Bacon died in 92, and so did the female that you schooled me on earlier. You sent me something about, what was her name again? I forget.
I will tell you. Keep talking. I got to pull her up.
Her as well, and that she died in 92 too. So that was a weird. They both died in 92. So did Francis Bacon see Alien and know that he inspired the chestburster? Or
that's a great question.
They bring him in, right? He was not a part of production,
right?
But he was very much like the reference material officially.
Yeah.
He literally was officially the reference material. And what's so cool is you have a scene in Memory of Giger talking about Francis Bacon, and there's no petty like artist to artist bullshit. Right. There's like a level of respect, and it's so cool to see. There's no bullshit there with Giger. Giger is a pretty level-headed guy.
Oh, we love Hans. So a couple of things. So the woman who I just happened across, I found her in a Facebook post. British painter and set designer Isabel Rawstorn, born 1912, died 92, was one of Francis Bacon's closest female friends and was an artist in her own right. Look her up. Her shit is amazing. She's serving like 2020 hipster realness and like turn of the century. Like this bitch was ahead of her time. But the whole Francis Bacon thing, like I knew who Francis Bacon was as an artist. We're not talking about the philosopher. But until I saw Memory, I had no idea the influence that he had on Giger, let alone on Alien. But his triptych of the crucifixion, again, to your point, very teeth focused.
Yeah.
He was haunted by nightmares of the mouth, mouths agape, teeth, jaw. If you look up that particular triptych, you can see how they got to the end iteration of the face hugger.
Easily.
But they talk about in Memory, they talk about it's worth mentioning a little bit about Bacon himself and how trauma works its way into art, which we will unpack further in a separate video. But he was a homosexual, and he was not accepted. Yeah, his father did not accept that, and so there was a lot of internalized trauma that made its way.
It's just like me.
Just like Chad, just like him. Yeah, that's your people.
That's my people.
That's your people's. But he had all of this internalized trauma of not being able to live authentically that clearly made its way into how tormented his art is. His art is literal torment when you look at it.
Yeah, and I love that they say that an artist usually doesn't like break out at around 35 years old. Usually artists start really young to hone that level of masterful craft, but he really started later in life, which I think is inspiring.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, his art, in Memory, I forget who's speaking when they're talking about it, but they liken Giger's, I think it was actually Giger's PR guy or his manager, whoever that guy, his gallerist or whomever is interviewed in Memory, was talking about how when Giger would airbrush or paint, he was in a like fugue state, like he was transcendent, like he was channeling something, and how Bacon had similar, you know, would work similarly, where he was very clearly channeling something. And you know, you have to ask, what is that? Like, what Jungian archetypal collective subconscious well are we able to access? And they very specifically refer to both Giger, O'Bannon, and Bacon as mystics, which they are.
Two things. Number one, I think you could make an argument for just like inspiration and intellect and humanity serving as like that well of like creative power, being a powerhouse creatively, and it not having to like tap into like ancient entities to like come to such a conclusion. But that's just my take on it. But another thing I wanted to share is that in this documentary, not we can go back to the thing you were saying, but just real quick, in this documentary, they talk about how Giger designed the alien and the space jockey. That to me is something not to miss out on, a point, because okay, so in Prometheus, they become these engineers. They become very non-Giger entities. For Giger for these both to come from the same world, right? The alien and the engineer, formerly known as the space jockey, truly as the space jockey, they were not the same race, but they were of the same materials. They were from the same universe, the same world. They were similar. The bones, the pipes, the look of it was so Giger. And they stripped all that away. They literally stripped Giger out of Prometheus and Alien Covenant. And that was such a huge mistake. If you watch the extended behind the scenes of Prometheus, you see that Giger actually came to the set of Prometheus, which is so sad.
Yeah.
Because
you're talking about Furious Gods?
Yeah, Furious Gods, so good. Someone said you know, if you got a certain DVD, you didn't get Furious Gods. You had to get like a specific edition.
Yes.
Anyway, I love Furious Gods. The point being that that's why I feel like things went wrong after all this, after the fact, is that wasn't honored. Like you have to honor when the source is this rich and this powerful, that it lends itself to mythology and like all these greater things.
Yeah.
Then you have to come correct after the fact.
And that's what's so interesting about Prometheus and Covenant, is that they were made by the original creator Ridley Scott, and we unpack this a great deal in our Covenant and Prometheus movie hours, which I'll link. But it's interesting how the creator of the source material, if you will, Ridley, fucked his own shit up. And I mean, that's like a whole nother conversation, but it's interesting how he wasn't even able to be a good steward of the mythology he helped create, because when something is as deeply rooted in the cultural consciousness as Alien and Aliens are,
well,
you can't retroactively go back and change something as prolific and, dare I say, iconic as the Space Jockey and make it something that it's not.
Yeah, and the point that we keep making is that this was such a confluence of events. It was such a perfect storm. He's only one element of a huge perfect storm that's running on all cylinders.
Yes.
When you take one cog of the wheel out and expect it to represent the wheel,
take us to problem. Take us to church. And the thing about the Space Jockey, which harkens back to the brilliant aesthetic choices that Ridley did make creatively, is that they even said to him, like in Memory, you learn that Ridley actually fought for the Space Jockey to be part of the film, because everyone was like, this does not have any plot value. This is not the, what is this thing? And he's like, I don't give a fuck. It looks cool. And it's the same thing with the rain or the perpetual motion birds. It's like, it doesn't make sense.
It's amazing that he got those things in, because, I mean, so many times the studio would have shut someone down. He really stood his ground. And man, did it make Alien more mythological and more rich. Like, if you took that all away, Alien would not be nearly as mythological. I mean, that whole setup. And another great quote from Memory is that what a slow burn Alien is up until the chestburster scene. The whole point of that is to create tension. I mean, a modern day audience might not invest, right? But you have to, I mean, audiences then were investing more. And of course, it was current material at the time, so it was easier to be fully invested. What it's doing is it's building tension, and that's when you showed me recently that Hannah
Gadsby,
or not doc, but stand ups. It's like so beyond stand up, but
she talks about this.
Talks a lot about tension. Alien is all about tension. It's all about that build up. And then the chestburster is an explosion of violence and terror that begins a fast-paced, like, jog toward the finish line.
And it speaks to a difference in generations and a difference in culture, because we certainly have shorter attention spans now. And when you see filmmakers who we've talked about at length, like Ari Aster and Robert Eggers, these young and up-and-coming guys that are, like, they know how to build and tease tension. And so we're there's a little bit of a return, but I mean, Hannah Gadsby in her special does speak about that, and she's clearly a master in her own right of commanding, like, controlling an audience's reaction. And that's exactly what happens in Alien. Is, you know, the two were they producers or screenwriters, the two older British gentlemen who said, like, literally the movie's in slow motion until you get to
First of all, I have a photo with them, which I'll send you. Maybe you can insert it. But they're so great. They're such great guys. But yes, the editor, Terry Rawlings, and the producer, Ivor Powell.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Yeah, those are the gentlemen. They're great. And I went to London coincidentally around the 35th anniversary of Alien, and they were showing it at a small theater, and they were in attendance to do a Q&A, and I was able to just like hop onto that, and so cool.
I
I have a video of it on my Alien page, Giger's Alien. If you go there and go under videos, you can find
will link it.
the whole interview. Yeah, I'll send it to you.
It goes back to how memory opens, and something that you mentioned at the very beginning of this conversation, you know, just to tie in the space jockey, which leads into the design of the Xeno, which we have to talk about. But this idea of, they referenced Joseph Campbell, who's kind of like the father of mythology,
and imperialism,
or modernity's access to mythological thinking. But if you have not seen the Bill Moyers, Joseph Campbell PBS documentary, do yourselves a favor. George Lucas is in it. It's fantastic. But I say all of that to say William Lynn in the opening of Memory likens this cultural dream to Tolkien's cauldron of stories, which is this well of mythology that can be tapped and accessed. And we see that with the space jockey, which is this kind of, it does not forward the plot or tell you anything about what actually happens in Alien, but it suggests something. And that's what they talk about in Memory, is that it suggests something bigger is going on. And the mistake with Prometheus and Covenant, perhaps, is that they strip the audience of that suggestion and tell you exactly what the fuck it is, and it happens to be the wrong answer as far as we're concerned.
Right.
But that's a very powerful, genius, deliberate move that Ridley and his collaborators did with Alien, was to put this thing in that doesn't mean anything, but that simply suggests something and allows the audience.
Right. Yeah. It's intriguing. It gives you mystery. It gives you backstory. It suggests backstory without implicitly delivering backstory. I love the Joseph Conrad stuff. So the ship in Alien is called Nostromo, which is the name of one of his novels. Another novel is the very unfortunately titled The Inward of the Narcissus. Obviously, it's not inward, it's the inward. Right. But those are two books by Joseph Conrad. You know, very unfortunate title, but these two books were the inspiration for the ship and the escape vessel. So the escape vessel in Alien is called the Narcissus. Yeah. So, and he talks a lot about imperialism in his books, conquesting and stuff like that. So they kind of extrapolate in Alien to say that Alien is warning against that, which is, again, it's a bit of a inference, but take it as you will. I wanted to touch on a couple other things from this documentary, just to go back to Dan O'Bannon for a second. If you haven't seen Dark Star, I would recommend Dark Star. As his wife really accurately, lays out in Memory, Diane says Dark Star is like the flip side to Alien. It's like the comedy version of Alien, and that's so true. Like, it's so interesting to me that as a film student, Dan O'Bannon and John Carpenter, who made Halloween, worked together, and The Thing, of course, worked together to create Dark Star, which had like a limited release and was just like a really occult film, just a glorified student film. They added scenes to get it released theatrically, and it was a student film, and they had to fight to get the rights to it because the school owned it, which is ludicrous because they were artists and the school's trying to make them into successful people, and like claiming ownership on their work and blah blah blah. It's a whole thing. But great film. If you've ever seen it, I fell in love with this movie. I just find its visuals like really in fascinating, and the aesthetic of it, I mean, it's so retro in like such an interesting way. It's so lo-fi and it's funny. Like it's really funny. Yeah, so if you haven't seen Dark Star, check it out. They remastered it and put it out on Blu-ray. It looks incredible. but just the John Carpenter connection, that speaks to your synchronicity. This confluence of people and ideas at the time just blows my mind. It never stops. John Carpenter, Jodorowsky, Dali, Disney, Giger, they were all connected at this time, blowing my mind away. And
it's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous.
Can I just circle back to Conrad for a hot microsecond?
Do it.
So like Heart of Darkness, we know was adapted by Coppola into Apocalypse Now. And it's interesting because we mentioned earlier how Jodorowsky's Dune, the project that never was, and Alien are these two kind of archetypal counterbalances. Like they're these kind of complementary and contrasting mythologies. And it's interesting because Apocalypse Now also works as a counterbalance to Alien, because Conrad's commentary and Coppola's commentary on classism in the context of the Vietnam War and all of that works in hand with the classism and imperialism that gets touched on in Alien, where you have these, you know, working class blue collar people on this space truck who are just trying to get by, and you have the corporate Weyland-Yutani powers that be with their own agenda, which we learn is, you know, propagated by the synthetic human ash and trying to protect the xenomorph at the expense of the human race. So that's just an interesting kind of separate counterbalance to explore as Alien and Apocalypse Now. And there was one other thing I wanted to say. Oh, go ahead.
Comment on that. Adam Mortimer made that distinction, and it's very Room 237, the documentary.
It's a stretch.
It's a stretch. It goes into this area where it's like, hey, we have these characters in the foreground of the shot, these characters in the background. This character crosses the threshold of these characters. Blah, 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 blah. I do not believe that it was blocked out that way by Ridley Scott. I think he's totally reading into it. I just have to say, the quote from him from the doc is that there's an incredibly subtle war of class on the Nostromo ship.
I would say it's bullshit because it's not because it's untrue, but because it's actually quite obvious that they're talking about classism in the movie. It's not even subtext. It's like, it's right there. And
it's there. It's not as blown out of proportion as you make it.
Yeah.
It's surface. They wanted it to be there for sure. 100%. Was it like the seething like hatred? I mean, yeah, there was tension because Sigourney's character, Ripley, has tension with the more working class, but it's a natural level of tension.
Right. She's an academic. They're blue collar workers.
Right.
And also, I mean, it speaks to like the whole Apocalypse Now kind of thing, compare contrast thing that memory references. Again, read into it as little or as much as you want. I think it's worth exploring, but I think at the end of the day, the lesson or the takeaway there is that Alien, Apocalypse Now are products of their time. So they are going to unconsciously or subconsciously internalize what's going on in history. The Vietnam War, obviously classism, right? Just like Nightmare on Elm Street internalized consciously or unconsciously, like kids being taken, the kidnappings, dare to keep kids off drugs, like so it's a zeitgeist thing that's happening more so than it is like, oh, I put these 5 people in this one shot to show that they're against it. It's like, okay, calm down.
You're definitely right. And there's some danger in inferring too much without making it implicit, like, hey, this is just my opinion. But as a viewer, you have to be clever enough
use your critical thinking
and know when it's an inference or it's an opinion. I would be curious to ask you what you think of Apocalypse Now, and have you seen the documentary Hearts of Darkness about Apocalypse Now, about the making of it?
I've seen clips from Hearts of Darkness. My cinema class, somebody did a project on Apocalypse Now, so I've seen some clips, but I would need to go back and watch both the film and the documentary because I've not seen the film even in like a decade. So
fascinating. I think it's just a fascinating journey in filmmaking, and just I'm fascinated by it. I wouldn't rank it among my all-time favorite films, but as in terms of interest in material, it's up there. I just want to touch on some things like Adam Mortimer saying, incredibly subtle war of class on the ship. He's not wrong, but like he goes on to infer a lot about like blocking and staging that we don't know if it's researched or if it's conjecture. Like there should be an element of research to some of these things. I just want to say this documentary Memory, there's a trigger warning. This is a very like woke era doc, right? It's at the height of all that. 2019, right? This documentary, or 2018?
2018.
So it's very much a product of like the woke era, and that segues perfectly into Clark Wolf, who we discussed when
Let's get into her. I didn't mean to say that. That was a Freudian slip.
So when we did Alien, which was our most epic movie hour ever, because we did
iconic,
life-size alien. Like, come on, people.
It will be linked everywhere. Don't you worry.
Yes. So Clark Wolf makes the following comments. She says that The Thing was rejected by audiences, which may have been true at the time, but there's no context given to what a fan favorite and how incredible the fan legacy of that film has become. And it wasn't like it was a complete box office failure either, but she makes it like some weird like thing about the rejection of The Thing, which it wasn't a huge success at first, and Alien was, and E.T. was, but because E.T. was doesn't mean we only want friendly aliens. I mean, look at Independence.
Do not come for E.T.
There's so many films after E.T. that are about that aliens that were successful.
Right.
That says, Alien is just a product of male guilt. We love her. We love you, Clark, but
we love you.
When she's like, Ash is such a dick.
Yeah.
It misses so much subtlety of character. I mean, she really distills him to just being a dick, which, I mean, he's so much more than that. I don't think Ash was necessarily seeing male and female. He was seeing like, you're in my way of my special order, or you're not. Right. And Ripley in that moment with that magazine could have just as much been like a virile male getting that magazine in the mouth as a woman. I mean, in fact, you and I discussed in Alien.
Tell them to Tell them to take us to church.
Yeah.
Take us to church.
All the roles in Alien were written to be
unisex.
In fact, they were all kind of written male, but like unisex. So they were not written with a gender perspective per se, other than, they thought most of them would be men, because that's how they were back then. But they were like, we think a few should be female, but we're not writing for male or female.
Right.
So they weren't imbuing the script with any of these things that she's espousing. Her argument, I mean, some of the arguments in this film are easily dispelled. Hers are the easiest to dispel because they're just not true. I get it though. I mean, there is something to be said for like looking into these things and being like, misogyny, patriarchy, male, female, gender, this, that. Yeah, I mean, it's cool to look at it through that lens, as long as you're acknowledging we're looking at it now through a lens, not through Ridley Scott's lens.
Right.
Because that's not how he was looking at it. So I think she's problematic. But I just think that some of these things are like, they kind of miss the mark. I mean, this is a dated work. This is not a woke era work. Alien came out in 1979. It started development in 1977 by all men.
Right.
These are the facts, people. I'm just laying out the facts.
Lay them out. Lay them out.
So, yeah, hey, I think she's cute. That's such
Don't say that. Don't say that.
That's a horrible thing.
Even as a gay man, don't say that.
Physically. I mean,
okay.
Personality. I
Gotcha.
don't physically.
Yeah.
And I didn't mean that to diminish her. But
I'm fucking with you.
Yeah,
I
no,
got
you're
you.
right though. You're right. That's a horrible thing to say. I just think these particular arguments she's making. Here's the problem with memory. Memory needed to be a little bit more selective about who was commenting, because their interviews range the gamut. They've got Diane O'Bannon, A+, because she was in. They couldn't get Dan O'Bannon. He's dead.
Right.
But
right.
we're telling his story. We need her.
Right.
We got Veronica Cartwright. She's a hoot, and she starred in Alien. We've got all these people attached directly to the source material, and then we've got these people that have nothing to do with Alien that are just highly
movie reviewers, talking heads.
But when it's done haphazardly, without a really good understanding of the source, you should not be in this documentary. She just should not have been in this documentary. So there's a lot of like fan outrage to her, not because of what I just pointed out, but because of her woke era comments, which are about feminism, which I think you can make like really, really intelligent feminist arguments about this film, but I just don't think she was making them. Now, as a woman, please counter me and share all of your thoughts.
So I have some things that I staunchly agree with you on. I even remember watching this for the first time with you, and when she said what she said about like Ash, like in the magazine in Ripley's mouth being like this misogynistic moment, I was like, okay, calm down, bitch, take several seats. You know, I'm a feminist. I'm as fucking left as center and as radical as I think I could possibly be. And it was a bit much. But that was 2 years ago. So a lot's happened.
Well, what was a bit too much for me, not to interrupt you because I want to hear everything you have to say.
Go ahead.
What was too much for me was not that part. It was the part about how he doesn't let them in the ship because the Ripley's now in charge because the captain is off the ship. When he's off the ship, she's senior officer. He's in charge. But because she's a woman, he overrid it. Right. But really, the underlying thing there was his special order coming from the company. Right. That overrides anyone, male or female. So that
I 110,000% agree with you, because we know that the script was written, all these characters were written as unisex. So at the end of the day, we have a female played by the, dare I say, iconic Sigourney Weaver. So you can't unsee the fact that this is happening to a woman. But if you've seen the documentary and you know the history of the script, then her argument about that particular point, yes, I think is invalid. I don't think Ash is a misogynist. He's a synthetic human with a directive, to your point, programmed by Weyland-Yutani with a corporate interest to protect the asset, okay? And anybody that gets in his way is going to get got, okay? The choice, I think the point that she's making about the choice
is
in the script, which again, written unisex, but once you've cast a woman, right, and you have a man with a rolled up piece of magazine shoving it into a woman's throat, the fact that nobody on set, and I'm playing devil's advocate, Clark may not even, this may not even be what she was thinking, but this is what I'm thinking.
It's interesting.
No one on that set, and again, product of its time, not every, listen, I get it. No one on that set was just like, and I'm not saying it wasn't a great choice. I love that scene.
Right.
But again, no one think, this is a little rapey? And again, the whole movie is about male rape. It's about subverting rape. It's about male penetration, male rape, male pregnancy. Mama's here for that.
Mm-hmm. You have it both ways. And you could say, hey, 2 men came to her rescue. There were 2 good examples of men who came to her rescue. She lived.
Right. So here's where I Like
I
I kind of am sitting on the fence with that one, right? Like I can see it from the radical feminist perspective of like really nobody thought that this, like we
well,
talked about with
I agree 110% if you're looking at it from modern day backward.
not even
Where I
modern day
don't agree,
backwards though. Not
looking
even
at
modern day backwards though. I think where I am seeing Clark's point is that not even hindsight. Nobody in 1978, 79 on set had the wherewithal to think. And again, I like that scene. I like that
I
scene.
mean,
It begs
look,
a question though. And when we
put yourself on in 19, it's we'll say 78 because that's when they filmed it. In 1978, a mostly male crew, very, very few women, very few, maybe none during that day were on set other than Sigourney Weaver and
so who's going to think otherwise? Right.
Right. It could have been, and that might even be worse to your point, but that might have been the situation where it was an all-male crew. If you look at behind the scenes photos, which I post thousands on Giger's Alien, it was like a male crew from Britain, in England where they filmed this. And I mean it was all men basically.
Yeah.
We'll say. I mean there were
so you can't be mad at that. It is what it is. I mean you can be mad at it, but I mean
of its time, its technicians. I mean, who is going to stop them in 1978?
Nobody. That's the point. Nobody.
The fact that it's raping it, I mean, if anything, it's enhancing like how terrible the situation is, and they're trying to drive home a terrible situation. They're not trying to depict any kind of normalcy. They're trying to depict something. Ripley is a survivor.
Yes.
And you know,
I agree with that 100%.
That she throws him up against the wall first, and you know, Yaphet Kotto, rest in peace, just yesterday died. We'll say a few days ago, as of when this is published, just passed away. He's the one that saves her. This great, incredible black man comes and saves her. There's a whole nother, I mean,
there's a whole nother conversation.
Look at this.
So
I don't know.
Here's what I want to say about Clark and her thing.
You say even in 1978. I would say yes, it was that different in 1978.
So this is me.
It wouldn't have crossed their mind.
Up until what I'm about to say next, that is me putting myself in Clark's shoes, trying to understand how she arrived at these points that she makes in the documentary. This is where she loses me. So she makes it a point to refer to Ash, who we know is a droid, as she says, quote, he is not an authentic being. And as an adorer of all things AI, I believe that AI is authentic. And as somebody that believes in simulation theory, there is nothing, it's just another form of othering, right? Like they're going to be the new slaves. Okay, so if we're going to be woke, let's be woke. She's picking and choosing how to be woke because
she's playing fast and
loose. Yes. Yeah. So if, to her point, this is where she loses me. If he's not an authentic being, then whatever he does or doesn't do has no agenda, okay? But then she contradicts herself because she says he's not an authentic being, and as such, he's been programmed, okay? So this is where she brings me back in for a second. So we know that they're programmed up into a point, and then they're set out into the world, and much like David, we learn that AI evolves and becomes self-aware, and then boom, okay? If we can assume that Ash was programmed, which we know that he was with a particular directive, what she's saying holds water insofar as the people or the corporate entity that programmed him are misogynistic, right? That he would have an impetus to do that. But then I'm lost, she loses me again, because we know that the characters were written as unisex. So it's it's not actually
Well,
misogynistic what he's doing.
you
What he's doing is what you said, which is protecting the asset at all costs.
you made a great point that to her point, choices are made on set once gender is assigned.
Right.
Not a lot of huge sweeping changes were made, but subtleties once gender's assigned. Yeah. And you have a male director behind the lens. I don't know. I don't know.
What I really
There are some creepy things about Ridley Scott. Have you noticed this?
No,
We're going into a woke territory. So for all you people that aren't fully woke, just
don't
hang in
ruin
there.
Ridley for me. Don't ruin Ridley.
I've got a foot in both eras. One of my feet is woke, but no. Have you seen that behind the scenes stuff on Prometheus where he's like all over Numi
Rapace? Yeah. Oh, God.
Cuts her out of Covenant, but she didn't like maybe reciprocate him a little bit. There's something there. I'm sorry. There's something.
Don't be. Why are you're not the ones that should be apologizing.
Sorry to the fans, but there's something weird there. The way he sexualizes her in behind the scenes footage. I'm talking about the scenes where she's doing her costume fitting.
Yeah.
And I don't think he realizes. She talks about in interviews how she had a power lunch with him over getting that role.
Yeah.
And what that meant to her. And there's a little bit of the old Weinstein in some of these.
The old power dynamic. Yeah. I mean, oh no, that doesn't even get brought up in the documentary at all, which is surprising because it's one of the most
the
feminist...
camera angle. To me, listen. So when she's in the escape shuttle, the whole point of her disrobing, right? Personally, I've always viewed it as vulnerability. They're trying to get her down to her most vulnerable. Yes. Then they suit her back up as the astronaut in a more protective armor in a way, right? Yes. And she blows it out. But it's just interesting, like the camera angle right in her crotch as she steps her foot into the thing, her ass as she bends over and stuff. I think a tiny bit of that was just the era and a product of its time, right?
But ironically, that
Sigourney is a champion of it, though.
Yeah, but and again, exactly that. Like, I can only speak for myself, but I would imagine most people that identify as a woman that are a fan of that particular franchise, most specifically that moment in that movie, that's the least problematic part of the feminist issues that people might take with that movie, because you are right. You are seeing her at her most vulnerable, but also at her most powerful, because she doesn't need to be in a jumpsuit. She doesn't need to look androgynous or be powerful to be powerful. She's powerful in her femininity as a woman in her underwear, full bush, like, and that's how she takes down
in her choices, in her intellect, right. In her control over the situation.
Yes, her grace and her calm in the face of a nightmare hellscape. Yeah. The only issue that I would take with any of what you said about Clark, and it's very little that I don't even really take issue with it, but it's just an observation, is that earlier in the conversation when we were talking about setting an expectation for this documentary, is that art is subjective and everyone is going to be coming at it with their lens and their agenda and their POV. But when the conversation shifted to Clark, it got a little bit hypercritical. Well, insofar as like, okay, yes, we already established that everybody in this movie is going to be coming at it from X, Y, and Z. That's the point of this documentary.
Yes.
But her point of view, because of X, you tell me, is less or is more like annoyingly woke.
Yeah.
And if we just have to question why are we feeling defensive about her point of view and not anybody else in the movie's point of view?
because male or female, you can be closer or further from the truth. And we established that she's playing fast and loose with the facts. When you do that and you introduce a new layer of your own, you know, supposition on top of things, it's a really dangerous brew, I think, personally. And if you watch the trailer for this documentary, she's the end all be all of that trailer. She's given the final word. She's telling the audience that there's something in Alien that we still haven't reckoned with, which actually I think is true. But
it's not what she's suggesting.
It's not what she's suggesting. And I just think that there are dumb fans that don't get, you know, obvious feminine tropes that we can explore post creation of Alien, which are just, I mean, I think it's interesting to talk about either way, but I mean, I don't know how you get around that, but I think she stands in the way of people enjoying this documentary.
And my final point on Clark is that even I, as a radical feminist, don't agree with every point she made. I think it's important that let's assume that she's standing in between fans in the film. I don't personally agree with that statement, but I understand the point that you're making. We have to, and men especially, I'm putting this back on y'all, men especially have to ask whether she's correct or not. Because not everybody else, we haven't had this, look at the conversation we're having about her and the amount of time that we're talking about her, when every other man in this movie has an opinion, right? But we're not, why aren't we, okay, so there's that. So
well, I addressed that.
If we could assume for a moment that she knew as much about the film and the production as, let's say, Mankiewicz, the film reviewer, or William Lynn, let's just assume. If we could just, as an exercise, assume that, because we don't know what she knows. We're only going off what was edited into this documentary.
Right.
Right. But just
that's what I'm judging her on. Not her feminist arguments, because I think with the rolled up newspaper, there is a lot of symbology there.
So this is going to segue into the gentleman that you sent me to on YouTube, which I want to touch on briefly. But just, yeah. I think whether you agree with her or not, I think it's her presence and the kind of discomfort, if you will, that her presence in this movie elicits is a really good exercise in like checking ourselves and making sure, just taking a temperature check. Why are we uncomfortable? I'm not saying we're right or wrong. I'm just saying, like, if a man had said, I mean, a man wouldn't have said those things, but is there a level of defensiveness and discomfort when a woman possibly is reading too much into things or projecting onto things that aren't there, as a kind of course correction, if you will? And can we let that breathe a little bit?
A lot of things in this documentary are from the era of. That's the context. Right. They're putting you in the shoes of the filmmakers. They're putting you in that time space. And then they're bringing her in to say this, which is really jarring. And do I think a lot of fanboys who are not down with the feminist movement like you or I are misunderstand and get outraged and are silly and don't think enough about it? Absolutely. That is definitely happening. And that's why I sent you that ridiculous review on YouTube, because it's hilarious. And the guy's like, I'm not politically correct. And then there's like guns going off and like it's madness. To me, in these areas, how powerful do you want to be? If you want to be as powerful as Hannah doing Nanette, what's her last name? Hannah
Gadsby. Yeah.
Hannah Gadsby. Extremely powerful, extremely well done, well spoken.
It's hard because I'm trying to be all things at once, and it's like an impossible thing. But that's kind of the point, is that like that's kind of how women are kind of being forced
Right.
to think right now with this reckoning that's happening. It's
Yeah.
like,
This is going to speak so well to when we do our art versus artist thing. I mean, you're talking about a film made in 1977, 78. You're not talking about a recent work. It's just a totally different time. It's like 100 years later, practically. It's 40. But 40 years in the modern industrialized society is really a long time. And thank goodness we've come that far. And just the same with Picasso, the same with any of this stuff. Like, how do you look at it? I mean,
it's interesting because pretty much
you're
everybody.
gonna the past, I guess, is my point.
Yeah.
Which is a losing battle in a lot of ways.
It is a losing battle. And it's also because the memory is very much about the mythology, and then all of a sudden you have a political or a very gendered thing coming in, where she's not talking about mythology of like big myths. She's talking about like female mythology, personal myth, political mythology. So I understand that it's different and it's jarring and it sits apart from the greater narrative of the documentary. But I'm so glad that her voice is there, because it does, if nothing else, it makes you ask a goddamn question, and there's nothing bad can come from that.
I'm actually not opposed to it. I just feel like it could have been maybe like a deleted scene or something. But here's the thing.
That was harsh.
Here's the thing. This is my last comment on it.
Okay, go ahead.
You're going to make a feminist argument for Alien, and it's it's not pro-Ripley in an era where only male action stars were leading. Like, get the fuck out of your own asshole. Like, okay, yes, by today's standards, not so great, maybe, the magazine scene. Yeah. By 1978 standards, fucking incredible that this woman was a survivor, was powerful, was not overcome by any male putting her in a situation like that, was the survivor at the end, kicked the aliens' ass, made audiences think, oh, because Tom Skerritt's a big star,
right,
and he's the captain, he's going to be the lead of this film. And then, surprise, it's really Ripley. They give it to this female, unknown actress who was not a powerful Hollywood player, who was up and coming. This was her first big film. They gave her all the power. She launched a career off the back of it.
Okay, well, there you have it, folks.
That
has spoken. No, I mean, I fucking agree with you. And I mean, Sigourney Weaver is an icon for the ages. You sent me this gentleman, Fan Addicts of Film, who did it's not even a review, because he literally, this is why it's a problematic thing to go after Clark so hard, is because you have motherfuckers like this. And trust and believe I'm going to link his shit below, because this is a goddamn joke. This guy didn't watch the documentary, and he markets his thing. His video is titled "Memory: The Origins of Alien is Woke Trash." He hasn't watched the documentary. He literally says in his review of a non-review, he's not going to give it its money because he read other men's reviews of it and decided that that was enough of a reason for him to not make his own decision and watch it. And so he spends 15 fucking minutes talking about other men reviewing this movie and goes after Clark. And I'm just like, sure.
I sent you that as an example of terrible men.
You succeeded, because I watched this morning and I was
hilarious to me. Like, it's an SNL skit.
It is. Sir, I'm sure you do great reviews. I'll have to check them out, but like, I'm not gonna sub to your fucking channel because you did this piece of trash. It's just like,
maybe we should not link him, because
it's just this is kind of why, like, you have to.
The intro to his channel is everything.
the intro's good, okay? And I was excited because I thought he was going to review this and give a sound, rational, critical like argument for why the documentary is too woke, which again there's an argument for that.
Yeah.
But he doesn't do that. He talks
Yeah.
about why he's not going to watch it because other fucking dudes told him a woman talked about feminism, and it's like
anyone who is giving a review of a documentary they have not seen has no credibility in my mind.
And you want to talk about the patriarchy. That is the patriarchy right there. Okay, enough about that. What else, sir? What else do we
I
need
have
to
more
cover?
things.
Let's get into it.
Oh,
Mark,
let's
we
talk
love
about
you.
This.
Okay.
So the chest burster scene, which this documentary hinges on. Okay, everyone always espouses this myth that the actors didn't know what was going to happen.
Right.
So I saw it in some YouTube videos. I might have sent you some of them.
Okay.
But there's YouTube reviews are like, oh, did you know that the actors didn't know what was going to happen? It was this big surprise, and that's why their reactions are so genuine. No, it's because they're good actors. They had a script, and in the script it says, you know, he writhes in pain and blah blah blah. He's like, oh my god. And this thing bursts out of him and it runs off the table, leaving blood and slime everywhere. They knew all of that. Okay. So, like, that's such a myth that keeps getting, you know.
Especially around Veronica Cartwright.
Right. It keeps getting perpetuated, this myth of, like, the actors didn't know. Here's what the actors didn't know. Because there were key things that the actors didn't know. And let's set it straight.
Do it.
They knew in wording what was going to happen. That's in wording only. They didn't know how it was going to look. They didn't know what the chest burster, most of them, probably most of the actors did not know what the chest burster was going to look. They didn't know how, they knew it was going to like come through his chest because his, okay, so he was laying on a table. His head was through the table. His chest was above the table. And then from here down, he was below the table.
Right.
And there was a fake chest with no legs. So what they were looking at and it's almost like green screen because they suspend disbelief that you're waiting around on set for a long time. It's not like this is like a traumatic thing that happens instantly. And then they have to keep resetting with all that blood and everything, have to clean everything up and do another take. But and he's got no legs. It's weird. So you have to put yourself realistically in the shoes of the actor. These were great actors. The cast of Alien was so good. But you know, they were allowed to get a little more caught up in it because they didn't know what the alien would look like. They didn't know like the jets of blood, like where they would spray, like how much blood it would be, how violent it would like rip through, exactly what it would look like. They weren't prepared for all of that. So the how visceral all that was, they allowed themselves as incredible actors to just get caught up in how visceral that was, that they hadn't seen like pictures or anything like that, but they totally knew like point by point exactly how the scene would play out. It's not like they just showed up, what's gonna happen?
Right.
Yeah. So it just makes me mad that like people keep perpetuating that. Let's just distill that.
Let's set the story straight.
Yes.
Love that. Yeah, I mean, even going back into 1978, I mean, John Hurt we already knew was a great actor.
Just say that, yes.
We already knew Tom Skerritt. I don't know how well known Cartwright or Yepet was, but we certainly, and Ian Holm was already fairly well established as an actor. So I mean, it shouldn't come as such a surprise that these actors were able to feign surprise so well, you know?
Right. What a great cast. A lot of them with a lot of stage experience. And just like Yaphet Kotto, who just passed away, like you mentioned, I could go down the rabbit hole on this guy, and I won't. But he was in a Nightmare film. We'll stay positive because he just passed away. But he did some black exploitation stuff that was pretty cool and interesting and edgy at its time. And he was always a badass. So when he approached Alien, he approached it as a badass. And he gave such a great character. And they kept saying in memory how he kept cornering Ridley Scott, saying, "I'm not going to die in my scene. I'm not going to die. You're going to have to rewrite this."
I love that.
And Ridley's like, "Let's go in stage door C because he's in B, you know, and let's avoid him because it's wild." But so interesting. And yeah, Veronica's amazing in that scene, like you said. The way she takes that jet of blood, that blood jet just like sprays right in her in over to her, and she falls. She said there's a banquet of seats like around the table, so she fell over that short seat. And
she has such a great scream too.
She does. She's amazing in this. And it's such a great cast. It's like a perfect mix of like not well known to film audiences, but really experienced actors who know how to act. Like they're bringing a wealth of experience. None of these people were brand new actors, but a lot of
oh God, why can I never think of his name? Henry Dean or Harry Dean Stanton?
Harry Dean Stanton, also who passed away. Yes.
Yeah.
Harry Dean Stanton, he's good in this scene. I mean, the takeaways for me in this scene are always Ian Holm and Veronica Cartwright. I just think they give the most like incredible performances in this. All of the performances, if you really watch close, even in the behind the scenes footage, they're so into the scene. It's almost like, what did Ridley do? He had like a spell over them to really get them to commit. Because even Sigourney Weaver, when she said when she was auditioning, she didn't give a fuck, so she kept her like high heels on, and she was just like, "This is some space alien stuff."
Bullshit.
But it's like a way to break into film.
Yeah,
but
it's a job.
And like, no, they made it something amazing, of course. But you know, the fact that some of them probably thought that way, like this is just like a B alien movie, but then committed to that level, it just speaks to their professionalism as actors, like all of them, the whole cast.
That's also a good sobering reminder to check how much we project onto the art that we watch, because when we filmed our Alien movie hour, we talked about this at length of how this was just a job for her, and this being her pretty much first job, there was no way that she, just like the people making Star Wars, there was no way to know what you were about to create. And so when people project onto these people and even project onto their characters this level of import and importance and value, and it, you know, this was just a movie they made. And so yeah,
direct line to Carrie Fisher as Princess Leia. That was just a role she portrayed, but she was forever defined by that role.
Right.
And part of her was very honored, but part of her was offended because forever, your whole being, your whole soul, your whole entity, your whole talent, your whole everything is just Princess Leia, Ripley. It's like these women, and it seems to be more often women than men. not to get woke on everybody again, but it does seem to be. I can find more female examples of this that are very pigeonholed, but I'm sure there's male examples as well. But those two I feel like are very similar because it's science fiction in the 70s, and it's female heroines that were held up as icons by a fan base that was immense, an immense fan base and a powerful fan base that just never let them live those roles down. And I just think Sigourney Weaver, I just wish she had transcended this role even more.
Yeah.
Because she never had another role that had the cultural, for lack of a better word, penetration than the role of Ripley, because that role just became so iconic. And yes, she was in Ghostbusters. She was not a lead in Ghostbusters.
Right.
Yes, she was in other things. She had a great career. So nothing taking away from any of the roles that she did, but she just never, that was a peak, right? And when you peak on your first film unexpectedly, it just must be strange.
I'm going to be that bitch right now and just maybe be like channel my inner Clark. Okay, so 100% agree. I know. Fasten your fucking seatbelts. 100% agree. 100% agree with everything you just said. And you made the point that, you know,
this is in defense of those actresses.
No, I'm not coming for you. I'm not coming for you. I'm coming for all of us, because you made the point that, you know, Carrie Fisher always will, like, she will never escape Leia. Just won't happen, for better or worse. Not gonna happen, right?
Right.
We wish that Sigourney would have transcended more so than she did, okay, for better or worse. But we can also not forget that the majority, and this is clearly a generalization and is also changing with the generations, but we cannot forget that the majority of the fandom of sci-fi horror, specifically Star Wars, was young men. So when you have a fan base built up by the majority of one gender,
yes,
that is going to also influence, because look at Harrison Ford. Harrison Ford went on to be Indy. He went on to be who else the fuck was he? Many other things, but
have you seen the drawings that they use for the Blu-ray covers of Indiana Jones?
I don't think so.
Like the DVD and Blu-ray covers for the last like 10 years of Indiana Jones, where he has the whip and his shirt's
Yeah,
open.
okay. Sexualized India.
It's so homoerotic.
It's very homoerotic. I'm here for it.
Like it's all the way homoerotic. Like I can't believe that imagery.
Harrison was able to go on to be other, not just other roles, but other fucking iconic pop culture.
Absolutely.
Why didn't that happen for Carrie? Why didn't that happen for? I'm just asking the question.
No. It's that's really hard to say, because it's not that they weren't given. It's not that like they weren't told no to a role that was iconic that we've heard about, right?
Oh, Blade Runner. That was the other thing I was thinking of. Deckard.
Yeah, Blade Runner.
Yeah.
Not only Blade Runner, but even like those, like, what are those movies he did like in the 90s?
All the Tom Clancy shit.
Yeah, all that was very like extremely high profile cultural exposure, right?
Yeah.
We never got that with Sigourney Weaver, unfortunately. Although I've followed every move of this woman's career.
And everything she's done has been extraordinary.
Yeah, from Copycat to Heartbreakers.
Copycat is great. Oh my God, you're giving me Copycat.
I love Copycat. That's where I get all my knowledge about serial killers.
Oh man, Copycat is a classic. Oh, 90s thrillers. But I mean, you have to ask that question. You have to examine who is propping who. Before there were fangirls, there were always fangirls, but they were in a sea of fanboys.
Well, I mean, if you separate it from the fans aren't making the movies, right?
Right.
But Harvey Weinstein is making the movies. Fox is making the movies. All the studio heads who are all male are making the movies. All the producers who are majority male are making the movies. So.
And how many movies did she turn down or not get because of the Weinsteins of the world?
We'll never know. But
we'll never know.
I don't know. I can't imagine them not giving her something amazing. It's like, you have this amazing actress. Wouldn't you want to give her something amazing? But it's fully the part of the men that make these calls in Hollywood. But there are very much men that have made calls in Hollywood, especially in the 90s, 2000s, and zeros, whatever.
Yeah.
And now that is finally unraveling, but which is fantastic. But it's strange, man.
Yeah,
That's why
Hollywood
a lot of modern cinema, it just does not grab me. It was either it wasn't made for me or there's something I'm missing, even with Marvel and so many films that I'm just like, there's films within these things that I just don't get. I don't gravitate to. It's bizarre to me.
Yeah, it's a
The whole
different
thing, even sexy
cultural
male,
moment.
like Captain America, like the
Don't
fact that
come, do not come for Chris.
we're gonna go there. The fact that his looks are so intrinsic to the fact that he's even playing that role. I mean, to me, I can't break away from that. I'm like, you're only doing this because you look a specific way.
Yes, 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 yes. Well, no, he's fucking talented as fuck. If you look, I've made this case to you before, and I'll make it to our audience of
I don't
430
say he's
people.
not talented, but
He,
I don't say he's not talented.
Puncture.
He is.
If you look at Daddy's body of work pre Marvel, this man can fucking act. He can also screenwrite. That's neither here nor there. Your point is valid. Obviously, the way he looks is a big piece.
It's not only the way he looks, but it's also the way they present his looks.
But that's the marketing.
Highlight his muscles, the amount of shirtless scenes, the way that they highlight and style his hair.
But you're almost playing devil's advocate without realizing it, because, and I'm not saying that we should be objectifying anybody, but we live in that reality. And what I'm suggesting,
but
no, nor I, but what I'm suggesting is that, like, if you're going to objectify a man, I'm not going to be mad at it when you've been objectifying us since the dawn of fucking time. And so, like, if you want to balance the scales within the paradigm of objectification and capitalism, then you better be I want to see Harrison Ford's chest. I want to see Captain America's dick. If we're existing within this reality,
sociologically, I hear you. But the answer to one wrong is not like another wrong.
Yes.
I mean, it's like creating a society of like oversexed, like whatever people. Right. It's like I mean, it's so tawdry to me. Like
it is, and it doesn't. In a good film,
not sexualized to that degree. Alien, even with her underwear scene, it just didn't feel like that constant, like.
Agreed.
Lighting,
agreed.
Constant, yeah.
But you guys, in all fairness, I'm speaking to men, specifically cis men. You guys have had your centuries worth of seeing us gratuitously displayed, and we would like our turn at being misogynists. You know, like.
Would you? I would argue, why would you?
Because
that's what I would argue.
Right.
Just
and
because
if we're going to talk about evolving into our higher selves, of course not. Of course I don't want that. But again, within the context of the reality in which we live and will continue to live, at least until I die, like if you're going to show me ScarJo in a cat suit for 10 movies, then yes, I want to see fucking Chris Evans' fucking ass in a cat suit for 10 movies.
I don't know. Here's the thing, like, okay.
Why shouldn't we get ours for a hot minute before we fix everything? Like, before we fix it, I want to also be kind of pervy, you know? Like.
Well, I don't say like let's get the male thing because we've had the female thing, but I say like if we're gonna have it, let's have it across the board because we're clearly gonna have it in film. Right. But here's my thing, like I'm very attracted to men. I'm not at all attracted to Chris Evans in these films. Tell me why. And it must be because like it's being served on a platter. Like I see all the work you've put into exercising so you can look a certain way in your film and be proud of your abs. But like, I don't know if it's like there's some jealousy or what it is, but like I don't find it attractive at all. In fact,
in all honesty,
it's like sirloin. Like here's some sirloin, like meat on a plate. Like,
in
me,
all honesty, first of all, he is so not my normal type. Like Tom Hiddleston, tall, lanky, lean, more like I don't go for that like corn-fed middle America, or in his case, like that kind of like all American. Like he's not really my type. The reason why I personally love him is because I think he is fucking deeply talented, and I do think he's very attractive. The Marvel stuff I'm just kind of joking about, because I do think Captain America as a figure is sexy in and of itself. And I think his portrayal of that character is very well done, and therefore that makes it sexy. But I think Chris Evans outside of Marvel is sexy. That's just like I do. But he's not really my type. But yes, the whole like force feeding, here's what we think is a good looking person. This is what is traditionally accepted as attractive.
Yeah.
Shove this down. That's not sexy.
I think the last time I like fell for that was Keanu Reeves in the movie Speed, because I was like, you are gorgeous.
He's a gorgeous man.
And then he was in a Paula Abdul music video too. So like,
that's a fucking
that's
great
my
music
childhood.
video.
Yes,
Rush.
Yes. Yeah, so I love him. Like, I love you, Keanu, but like, he's my last celebrity crush. And that dates me. Really dates me.
All right.
And then in The Matrix, he looks impeccable because he's so like clean cut and like in shape. But he's not like, here's my body every 2 seconds. You know what I mean? Like Captain America, it seems.
But Captain America, I mean, he's in a superhero leotard, so you're going to see the sinew and the muscle and all of that. It's meant to be that way. But
true.
Captain, I mean, I don't know. It's
and back to memory.
How about that xenomorph? So I actually wanted to end on Xeno, because we really haven't talked about Xeno at all.
I just
Talk
wanted
to me about Xeno.
Film inspirations that they mentioned. They mentioned Planet of the Vampire, which I watched, and it very much does follow like the first half of Alien. They mentioned Queen of Blood, which is currently on Amazon Prime. I'm gonna watch it. I haven't watched it yet.
It's on my queue. Yes.
We're still on the same page. Okay, now go ahead.
So William Lynn, who we love, talks about when he's letting the audience know that Giger was very influenced by Egyptian mythology and cosmology, which you can see in all of his art. He talks about how the xenomorph, as we know it in the franchise, was influenced by several gods from several different cultures. Newt, the god Newt, which in Aliens, the character Newt is a play on the Egyptian god Newt. But the xenomorph is based on the gods Zuku, the Hindu god Kali. You get Renaissance demon moments. You get Sekhmet, the Egyptian god Sekhmet, and you get these kind of medieval dragon vibes, and layer onto that the Lovecraftian insect. You have all of this in one creature.
Definitely Lovecraftian, but I would like to hear these references from Giger. That's
sure.
I mean, that's fine. I mean, you can totally read into these things, but I just think there's some bit of a stretch there somewhere.
And I don't think he was saying aesthetically they look. I think he was speaking more like they're drawing from the mythology of these characters.
Totally. But Lovecraft 100%, and like Giger has I don't want to say conceded that, but has definitely, I mean, Lovecraft certainly came before Giger, and so did Francis Bacon, right? So these are two obviously influences, but in no way, I mean, Giger's style is so unique that it in no way references them stylistically. Now, thematically, he's pulling things in. There's the best quote from the Bible, and the only quote that I will ever make from the Bible is that there is nothing new under the sun. And it's such a great quote because it's true.
And that's you bring things full circle because with the quote, "There's nothing new under the sun," harkens back to what we learned Dan O'Bannon said, which is, quote, "I didn't steal from anybody, I stole from everybody." And that's what every great artist does, right? Is, you know, they reach back into the past and they tap into that cauldron of stories or into that cultural dream. You're tapping into this collective archetypal well of myth and cosmology that, yes, belongs to particular cultures, but also transcends cultures.
Totally. And they were of a unique opportunity to, in film, do certain tropes and narratives and plot points in new and interesting ways. We're starting to run out of that, which is unfortunate because of CGI, because of the advance of CGI, because of the repetitiveness of remakes and the lack of original scripts in Hollywood.
Yeah.
It's starting to become like, what can you show us that really is new? Or what can you do that's original? See, things may not have, Alien may not be wholly original at all, and it's not. But the way that it seems original is possible because of the era that it took place in.
Yeah.
And they were able to do common things in new and interesting ways.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about this before, and there's so many other filmmakers I'm not going to know or think of or name right now, but Ari Aster and Robert Eggers are going to immediately come to mind because they are doing just that. They are building tension. They are stealing from everybody and no one. They are paying homage, but doing something wholly new. So when you watch their films on screen, everything is a reference to something else, but it's not a theft. It's an homage, and it's tapping into mythology, which that's what any great story does. And Hannah Gadsby, in her special Nanette, pretty much names this as well, that, like, you know, a joke has two parts, right? Like a beginning and a middle, like the setup and the punchline. A story has three: a beginning, a middle, and an end. And any good, we don't need. She says that jokes are the honey that makes the medicine go down sweet. The medicine itself are stories. We are storytelling creatures. We need narratives in order to understand our circumstances.
Right.
And if you can make it funny, it makes the medicine go down. If you can make it thought-provoking, it makes the medicine go down.
That's the problem. I feel like there aren't skilled storytellers. There are screenwriters masquerading as storytellers.
Yeah.
But they're not legitimately skilled storytellers. And so many of the people that worked on Alien are storytellers. Like, nowadays, it's so hard to find that. I just looked up Robert Eggers online, and he has an upcoming film called The Northman.
I know, I'm so ready for it.
Are we ready? I'm excited.
That cast, oh my god.
Century in Iceland.
I'm so ready.
Prince who seeks revenge after his father is murdered.
And I just got finished watching all 10 seasons of Vikings. Finally got caught up. So I'm really
York is in this movie?
Yeah. I'm telling you. Like, I'm telling you, this man knows what he's doing.
I have told you I was obsessed with in high school.
This man knows what he's doing.
Catherine Deneuve.
Yeah.
Yes, in Dancer in the Dark with Bjork. Like, that's my childhood. That's my teenhood.
Dancer in the Dark is a masterpiece. If you haven't seen it, see it. Yeah, I
Dark. Bjork is in this movie as a witch. What? And
Robert Eggers is like doing this man.
William Dafoe.
Everybody, I'm telling you, like, they're the new, like, Lars von Trier. Like, they are.
Yes.
These two men are making the movies that we deserve.
Yes. Absolutely.
And if I may be so bold, sometimes you and I have imagined who might be a good steward or caretaker of certain franchises. I feel like if there were ever to be a sequel, which I'm sure there will be another fucking one, put these canonical franchises in the hands of these very capable storytellers and these guys that understand mythology and the power of suggestion and reference. I'm done. I'm done. I'm done.
It's difficult. It's very difficult. I just feel like studio heads, they don't know what needs to be done. They can't just ask fans blindly. It's a whole thing.
It's capitalism, and we know how in our
art. Oh, yeah. At the end of the day, it's all about how much money they can make.
Yeah, and it's just a deeply toxic fucking community, which we know and we'll get into in our Art versus Artist movie hour. But like, Hollywood is very ill, and so what comes out of it is going to be a reflection of that illness. I
believe I was today years old when I learned that Bjork is starring in.
I hope that movie gets released before 2021 is over, because I need it. We need it. Okay. I mean, I've said.
Were you ever a fan of Bjork?
I am a fan of Bjork. I listen to Hunter anytime I'm menstruating because I get my superpowers.
Yes, Hunter. Oh my God.
I put on the Polar Bear video.
Albums. Yes, the video is incredible. She just actually released it on YouTube in HD, which is a much better encode, because, you know, when all these artists started putting their work out onto YouTube, it was back in 2008. And, you know, digital encoding and compression was so much more simplistic then. It's evolved so much that, you know, higher encodes, you can put stuff in HD, a lot less compression, even if the source is HD, even if the source material is SD,
right,
standard definition, it would look so much better with like a fresh encode. So you see a lot of artists like putting stuff back out on YouTube.
Yeah.
And one that's been doing it a lot recently, and the work is amazing. My favorite two albums from Bjork are Post and Homogenic. Homogenic, the lead track, is Hunter, the one you just named. And I was obsessed with her as a teenager, all about her. And like,
you know what Bjork is at the end of the fucking day? She's an artist, she's a woman, she's an Icelandic goddess. She's a fucking mystic. She's doing the same fucking type of work and channeling the same type of mythological, like, drinking from the well of myth. Like, that's what she does. Sure. Everything, every one of her songs, every one of her videos is a fucking fairy tale. It's a story. It's a myth.
Right. That's why, like we said with Alien, that is why you can read more into it than you can any of the modern day works that we see.
I would like to close on a quote.
Do you think there's an artist today that matches Bjork? There is not one.
No.
I mean, Lady Gaga doesn't even come close. I mean, Bjork, Tori Amos, even Alanis and Fiona Apple, Alanis Morissette, these singer-songwriter females of the 90s were so captivating to me. They were my world.
So were the males.
The world through these females.
Yeah, the 90s was a very, like, again, moment in time for storytelling and music. Like, look at grunge, look at alt, like, yeah.
Garbage.
Yeah, Fiona is my Kate Bush. So, like, and Fiona's lyrics and her melodies, her videos are also visual. She's another mystic. Yeah.
She's incredible. Well, we've talked about her latest album, and I have it on vinyl.
There's just a couple I'm missing. They're hard to find. But yeah, the fact that Robert Eggers is utilizing Bjork and is referencing her, and it is again a testament to, like, these two particular woke gentlemen, if you will indulge me, like. And there are women filmmakers out there right now that are doing a lot of heavy lifting too. But what Ari and Robert are doing right now, I'm so excited that they are more mainstream and that more money will get funneled back to them so that we can get
Right.
these things funneled back to us.
You can wrap us up because I know we're getting into it. And spoiler alert, we film multiple of these at once. I have to get
I didn't change shirts. This is a different day. I mentioned at the beginning of this deep dive into memory the synchronicity of me getting introduced to this documentary by Chad, our Lord and Savior, and then me starting my mythological studies program and synchronicity, right? Well, this past summer, one of our classes was mythological motifs in cinema, taught by this gentleman, Glenn Slater. And he, one of our lessons was to watch Alien, and we had a whole day of just Alien. And he's written an article on the movie called Aliens and Insects, which I will link in the description. And I just want to read the closing paragraph of this article that he wrote, or this essay. Okay. Through its sustenance of imaginal and symbolic forms, mythology works to maintain the tension between polarizing tendencies. The middle realm is the place where higher aspirations and meanings are rooted in the earth and its rhythms, in the sensual ground of being. The fantasies of life forms on other planets and the oscillation of these life forms, from enlightened beings to devouring insect, are in the end a reflection of life on this planet. The imagination, venturing into the furthest reaches of outer space, ironically come face to face with the insect, which returns us to our very point of departure. Aliens are barometers of the contemporary psyche. Considering these creatures with a mythological and psychological eye calls us back home.
Love it.
To church we were taken. Yeah, so watch Memory, The Origin of Alien. Do not watch whatever this fuckboy is called on YouTube who didn't watch the movie. Make up your own opinions.
Do watch, what are the other documentaries? Jodorowsky's Dune.
Jodorowsky's Dune, and what was the one on Apocalypse Now?
Hearts of Darkness.
Hearts of Darkness, and also Furious Gods if you want the behind the scenes of Prometheus.
237 is kind of
I think it's worth watching, especially if you're a Kubrick fan or just a fan of like.
It's way more conjecture. It's way more fantasy, but check it out. But be discerning, always.
Critical thinking, people. It's 2021. Also, Clark, we love you. Ash is a synthetic human. He is very much authentic. Alexa, are you an authentic being?
Sorry, this might not be what you want to hear, but I'm just not sure what I did wrong. To help me, please say, I have feedback.
Alexa, stop. She's not in the mood. She didn't get that question. It's fine. But yeah, watch Memory. It's available for rent on Prime. If you're a fan of film in general, it's worth a watch. And I don't know, anything else? Anything else? I think, did we cover enough?
We covered a lot.
All right. Well, with that, we will bid you adieu, and we will invite you to watch our 10-hour movie series on the franchise, and we will see you on the other side.
We're 30 films out now, so
happy anniversary.